Hello everyone, welcome to Pepcoding. In this video, we will look at the question find k closest elements. Okay, so let's take this question statement. Okay, so in this question, I'm given an array and I'm given a k and an x. Right, I'm given two integers k and x and an array. And let's say the k for this question is 3 and x is 45. Okay, so I'm given k elements, or I'm given a number k, a number x, and an array, and I have to find all the k elements which are closest to x from this array. Okay, I have to find all the k elements which are closest to x from this array, which means I have to find three elements which are closest to 45 from this array. So my answer for this question is going to be 30, 40 and 50. Why? Because 30, 40 and 50 are closest to 45. Right? On the number line, they are closest to 45 and they belong to this array. So how are we evaluating that? Let's see. We are finding what is known as gap. Right? We are finding what the gap between our number and that array value. So let's write a gap here. And what is my gap going to be? My gap is going to be the absolute value of that array value and x. Right? So if we write the gap here, the gap between 10 and 45 is 35. Right? The gap between 20 and 45 is 25. The gap between 45 and 30 is 15. Right? Between 45 and 40 it is 5. Between 45 and 50 it is 5. Between 45 and 60 it is 15. Okay, so these are my gaps and I have to find k elements which are closest to x using these gaps. Now, how am I saying that gaps are going to give me the closest k elements? Let's say I have a equals to 30 and I have b equals to 40, right? And my x is 45 and my gap of for 45 for these two numbers, for a and b, are going to be 15 and 5. What does this mean? Let's draw a number line. Let's draw a number line like this. Right? This is 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40. Right? And this is 45. Something like this. Okay? This is my number line. You can clearly see that 40 is closer to 45 from this number line. And why is that? Because the gap between 40 and 45 is of 5 elements and the gap between 30 and 45 is of 15 elements, which means that 30 is absolutely more or 40 is absolutely more closer to 45 than 30. So on the basis of gap, we can say that if the gap is smaller, then my value is going to be more closer to my x. Okay, so between two values, between a and b, it is written here that if a is closer to x if the value or the gap of a is smaller than b. Okay, if the value of if the gap value of a is smaller than gap value of b, it will mean that a is closer to x. Okay, this is my first thing. Now let's see in this part, my a equals b, or sorry, the b value here 40 is closer to 45. Okay, so b will be the answer for this part. Now let's use another example. Let's say I have a equals 30 and I have b equals 60. Right? For a equals 30, b equals 60 and my x is 45. The gap for 30 is 15 and the gap for 60 is also 15. Right? Now I see that the gaps are equal. Now, if the gaps are equal, I will say that A is closer to 45. I will say that A is closer to 45 because 30 is smaller than 60. So if I have two values for which the gaps are equal, it is written here that if the gaps are equal here, then I would prefer that A is smaller than B, right? If A is smaller than B and the gaps are equal, I would say A is closer to X. So here 30 since 30 is smaller than 60, for this part my answer would be 30. Okay, if I draw a number line like this, and 45 would lie here, and 30 would be here, and 60 would be here. The gap is 15 on both the sides, right? They are both equally far away from 45, but we are preferring 30 over 60 because 30 is smaller than 60. Okay, I hope you understand the question. So now let's try to discuss an approach. Okay, in this question, we are going to use a priority queue. Okay, and in the priority queue, I'm going to add the elements on the basis of their gap. Okay, so let's say I have a max heap priority queue, and I am going to add a pair class to it. So this priority queue is of type this priority queue is of type pair class, and in my pair class I would have my value. So this is class, right? So in my pair class I would have my value, which is val and my gap, right? Because I need the value and the gap to say like which element is closer to me. So I would need a pair class in which I will store a value and a gap. Okay, so this is my priority queue, and it is of max height or max heap, which means that if I peek the value, it would return me the max value. Okay, so now in this question, I would put only k elements in my priority queue. And why is that? I'm going to put only k elements in my priority queue. And why are we doing this? Well, let's use this approach, which is what, how, and why. Right. First, we'll discuss what and how, and then we'll discuss why we are doing it. Okay. That will be more clear as we just code, and you will see like why did we use a max heap and we filled only k elements. Okay. So let's just fill 10 and 35. Right, for the first k elements, it does not matter how I fill them, right? Because k elements are going to be existing are going to exist in the map in this priority queue regardless, right? They're going to be in this priority queue regardless of making a comparison, right? Because if I have three elements and I put all the three elements in my priority queue, right, that would be my answer only because there are only three elements. So at first I'm going to put my three elements, which is 10, 20 and 25, right, and 30 and 15, right? So for three elements I just simply add them to my priority queue, right? And on the top of my priority queue or on the peak I would have 10 and 35, right? I am using gap as my reference. So this is max heap and I am using the max gap as my top. Now we are here, right? I've used this, I've used this, I've used this. Now we are here. So I'm at 40. Now if when 40 and 5 comes, it will say that 5 is smaller than 35, right? If my current value, if my current gap is smaller than the max heap gap, right? If my current gap is smaller than the priority queue peak value, then it will simply mean that it is closer to that value or it is closer to my 45, right? If I have a value which is coming onto the priority queue and on the top of the priority queue or the peak of the priority queue, we have a value which is greater than that value, then I can simply say that the value which is coming, has more priority because the gap is smaller, right? So if the gap is smaller, I'm just going to remove 10 and 35 from my array or from my priority queue, and I'm going to add 40 and 5. Okay, so what I'm doing is, if my gap is smaller for the element, I would remove the top value and I would add the incoming value, which is 40 and 5, in my priority queue. Okay, next now this is removed, right? Since 10 and 35 is removed, my top will be 20 and 25. Okay, now 50 will come. Now since 50 is here, we have 50 and 5. Now on the peak value, I have 25 and I have 50 and 5. Right now 5 is greater than 20, 5 is smaller than 25, which means that 50 is closer to 45. Okay, so I will also remove 20 and 25 from my priority queue, and I will add 50 and 5. Okay, so this is removed, and 50 and 5, or on the top of my priority queue, I would have 30 and 5, 30 and 15, right? Since the gap is largest here. Now we have 60, right? We are 60. So we have 60 and 15. Now for this value, for 60 and 15, I would not replace it because I know that 30 is smaller than 30 is smaller than 60. So there were two conditions, right? If the gap is smaller, then it is going to be in my priority queue. But if the gap is equal, then I would choose on the basis of their value. And if the value is small, if here you see the array value is smaller than 60, right? So since 30 is smaller than 60, 30 is going to stay here only. So I hope you understand this part. Now let's code this and then we'll see how it is actually working. Okay. Okay. So first thing, let's make our class, right? So public static class pair, right? And we would have a value and an array, or not array, we would have the gap, right? Let's make also a pair like this, right? And we need some parameters. So it is int value, int gap, and this is this dot value equals to value, and this dot gap equals to gap. Okay, so I have this public static class. Now we don't have to just return this priority queue, right? In this question, it is saying that we have to return the answer list. So I have to return all the elements in a list, and the elements in the answer list should be in the ascending order. Now what does this mean? That I have these elements, right? So after this is all of this is done, I would have these three elements remaining in my priority queue, right? The only three elements, and they are the closest to my k. So I have to put them in an array list, and the array list should be in increasing order. So I would have 30, 40 and 50, right? So let's see. Here we have return to return. Okay. So first let's make our array list, and this would be integer. Let's call this list, right? And I will return this list. Now let's make a priority queue. Okay, and this would be of class pair, and I would have pq equals to new priority queue. Now I'm having a maxi priority queue, so I would have collections dot reverse order. Okay, so I have this priority queue. Now I want to have a comparable. And why do I need a comparable? Because I am storing them on the basis of their gap, right? I am storing these values on the basis of their gap. So I definitely need to compare the gaps. So first we are going to write a comparable. Okay. So this is public int compare to, and we would have a pair of object other, right? And now I'm going to check that if my values are equal or my gaps are equal. So if this dot gap is equals to my other dot gap, then I would have to return on the basis of their values. So this dot value minus o dot value. But if they are not equal, then I can just simply say return this dot gap minus o dot gap. Okay, so this is fine. Now here I have this priority queue, and after this, first I need to fill the k elements. So fill the k elements, or just let's just traverse to the array. So for int I equals 0, I is less than arr dot length plus plus I. Now I'm traversing through the array. Now I'm traversing through the array and I'm filling them till. So if I have like something like this for k elements, first k elements, first k elements, this is for first k elements only, that if my priority queue dot size is less than k, then I just simply have to fill them. So priority queue dot add and a new pair, and this is arr of I. And what is my gap? It is going to be mat dot absolute, and this the mat dot absolute value of arri and x. Okay, I'm filling them in my priority queue like this. But if the size is not equal, else I'm going to check. I'm going to check now I'm going to check that if the value of the coming array value, right? If let's say I have 40 and I had 10, 20 and 30 in my priority queue. So if the coming value, if the gap is smaller, so I'm going to check that if pq dot, or let's say arri minus x, and the absolute value of this, so mat dot absolute value of this is smaller than, is if the absolute value of arri minus x is smaller than pq dot peak dot my gap, right? If it is smaller than my gap, then I will remove the peak. So pq dot remove, and I will add this value. So pq dot add new pair arr of I and the gap, which is mat dot absolute of arri minus x. Okay, so I've done this. I've filled all the elements. So this is for first k elements, and this else is for next elements, right? This is working for the next elements. After that, after all of this is done, I would have the k closest elements in my priority queue, right? So I just simply have to, or just I simply have to say, I have to sort also, I have to sort my list, and I have to first fill my list as well. I have not filled my list. So while pq dot size is greater than 0, I'm going to fill my list. So list dot add and pq dot remove dot, and what am I removing? I'm only going to add the integer value, so value. Now I have to sort this, so collections dot sort and list. Okay, so here I've filled my list from the priority queue, And here I've sorted my list and I've returned the list. So this looks fine. Let's run this. It is accepted. Let's submit this code. So this is the right answer. I hope you understand this part. Now, let's say the time, what is going to be the time complexity. Okay, let's also discuss the time complexity. For this question, here you can see that for any operation in a priority queue, right? For any operation in a priority queue for n elements. So let's say I have k elements in my priority queue right now, right? If I have k elements in my priority queue, then for any operation like add, remove, and add, the operation is going to take log of k time because there are k elements. So the operation is going to take log of k time, right? If the if every operation is taking log of k time, right? If every element is taking log of k time, and I can also I can also see that I'm working for n elements, so my total time complexity is going to be n log k. Okay, because I'm traversing this array for n elements and I'm adding since I'm just doing actually one task only, right? I'm adding something and I'm removing something or adding something. So at most for n element, for one single element, I'm doing one task only, which is either adding, right? So since I'm doing only one task, it is taking log of k time, and I'm doing this task for n elements, my time complexity is going to be n log k. Okay, I hope you understand this part. If you don't, I would suggest rewatching the part which you don't understand. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.